Hello, everyone. This is Renault, and today we've got a dun 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 drama video. So today, I'm going to be talking about Bleeding Fool and pretty much the utter destruction of whatever hint of integrity this blog. It's not a news site anymore. I don't call it a news site. It's a glorified blog site. And so, Bleeding Fool, I've had a lot of doubts when they started doing a lot of demonstrably false, fact-based articles and just general hit pieces. And I want to emphasize that you can criticize Comicsgate without making false statements. You can criticize people without making false statements. But apparently, Bleeding Fool has lost all capacity to engage in any sort of fact-based criticism, and it's all speculation, opinion-based hit pieces, taking things out of context, and just basically just all the worst vestige of journalism that we've come to expect. And so at this point, I no longer consider Bleeding Fool a news source like I mentioned earlier. I see it as no different than Bleeding Cool at this point. And since Bleeding Fool and Bleeding Stool, or whatever you want to call them, are pretty much the same thing at this point. Now, let me explain why I've come to this conclusion. I lost a lot of faith based on some previous things, but this most recent little debacle has pretty much sealed it for me. So, in this situation, Micah Curtis, who has been around the internet web space for a very long time, and was a contributor to Bleeding Fool, he quietly stepped away from Bleeding Fool. And normally, when someone quietly steps away from an organization or anything else like that, that's it. Let sleeping dogs lie. And so, apparently, this individual named Chris Braley decided to concern troll and nag him after the fact with those out of context and generally false statements that I was talking about earlier. So, in this, Micah Curtis says he abandoned Bleeding Fool because of their associations with John De La Rose, who is a doxer. I'm not going to comment on whether he's this other word, the anti-S word here. I have no idea on that. I haven't investigated it further, but he's a doxer and pretty much a jerk, and that would normally be enough for me. Micah Curtis has his own opinions. He's seen enough evidence to believe that John De La Rose is this, that I'm highlighting in blue, and so he okay, whatever. And apparently that's when Chris Braley decided to nag, harass, and rely on out-of-context statements and information to concern troll Micah Curtis. And so Micah Curtis says he, as in Chris Braley, was emailed an out-of-context clip by Rumble Terrier, who is a piece of shit. The same clip that was used by Poulter, who is also a piece of shit, who I'll be tackling later, to lie about me in a recent video of his. In it, I dare to use the word, this word, blank dumpster, to describe Gina. Gina is from War Campaign streams where a man of sex dresses in drag. And if you actually highlight Man of Sex's name here, you actually get a picture of Gina. There's Gina. Look at her. Isn't she beautiful? She is... Man of Sex is cosplaying as a slut with a very deep voice, and as you can see, a beard and a mustache and everything else. So it's a bit, and it's a joke. So he calls Gina cum dumpster in the stream in question. Let's highlight what Chris Braley says here. Before ending your relationship with our website and unfollowing us on Twitter, who cares about unfollows? Why is he... Who cares? You indicated that part of the problem you had with us is a couple of our contributors claim to be Christians, but don't really espouse the beliefs. While I respect that philosophy, imagine my disappointment when someone showed me this recent clip. And, Bible verse Chris Braley, he's wielding the power of Bleeding Fool to push an agenda here, to concern troll, to nag, to abuse the influence he has with Bleeding Fool. Now, I'm already familiar with the clip, so I'm not going to show it here. But Micah Curtis calls Gina, who is playing a bit as the whore of War Campaign, a cum dumpster, and she agreed. If And even if she didn't, it doesn't matter because that's part of the bit. So again, he's relying on out of context information to concern, troll, and try to criticize people who have quietly left the organization. It's who cares? So Micah Curtis continues. During this exchange, Braley stated that John De La Rose openly supported a Holocaust denier and is morally equivalent to dildo memes. So getting behind someone who denies the death of millions of Jews is equatable to fake penises. And again, for full context, making a joke about war campaign character on the show hardly means I'm not a Christian. Chris, Rumble Terrier, and Preston Poulter clipped that out of context, and you fell for what they wanted you to fall for. Instead of saying, Micah, what went on here? Which is a legitimate question. That's what journalists are supposed to do. Hey, can you tell us what's going on here? You came around like a personal judge. The character we're joking about is a work-paying guy called Man of Sex, cross-dressing as a character called Gina that we all pretend is gorgeous. Beyond that, keep something in mind here. Of the two of us, which brought John De La Rose on to Bleeding Fully, he's openly supported a Holocaust denier. Which one of us kept Preston Poulter around as he published blatant lies on your platform, planking your eye friend? Which is all true. That's all true. Preston Poulter is a habitual liar, misquoter, and does things out of context, and he's still working for Bleeding Fully, and that's something I'm going to tackle later. First, I addressed the issue with Preston, and he has since been forbidden from discussing confiscated site any further. Let's take a look at that. Preston Poulter. Actually, let me just, because I think he wrote an article very recently. I actually think he did something very recently. Oh, no, he hasn't. I thought he did, but it doesn't matter. John openly supporting a Holocaust denier, of which I've never seen proof of, is about as unattractive as harassing people with dildo memes, but I guess it is relative. I reached out to you privately because I have respect for you, Micah, and I took the time to watch the whole video segment. Albeit at a higher than feed, Micah, it doesn't matter because it's a bad look. But if you're okay with it, who am I to judge? I'm sure you've read Ephesians. Again, more Bible speak to concern troll. But, so, again, we're not necessarily in agreement if John De La Rose is the Holocaust denier or supports Holocaust deniers. But it doesn't matter because this guy, Chris Braley, is concern trolling him and saying that it's equivalent to dildo memes. It's not. It simply isn't. So, and again, this is Chris Braley. Now, Micah Curtis continues. It's a fact that John De La Rose did dox Sweetcast, Clint Barton, or Clint. He's not Clint Barton, Clint. For some reason, your name escapes me. It's remarkable how that works, but Clint was doxxed by John De La Rose. He threatened his family, correction. He made what in my opinion, are veiled threats against his family. And John seemed to have a problem with Jews. And then Micah Curtis presents his evidence. Again, I'm not 100% certain because when you click on it, I can't see it clearly. It's too blurry. And I could look into it, but John De La Rose has a history of deleting tweets. So I have to follow up with Micah Curtis on this later. But again, the point of me posting all this is that one person trying to come around and take an out-of-context clip and use it to destroy my reputation and likely hurt my small business in both digital media and comic books. It's absolutely disgusting. And that is true. Chris Braley is using his influence with Bleeding Fool, they're the same thing at this point, to try and threaten someone and neg someone and wield his power over him. Now, you might ask, who exactly is Chris Braley? Is he just a regular contributor like Preston Poulter? No. Actually, no. Is the managing editor at Bleeding Fool. Which means that all those times that Preston Poulter and God knows who else makes factually inaccurate statements, this guy, it went, this guy's partially responsible. He's the managing editor. Whenever something factually incorrect or out of context, that's this guy approving of it, or at least turning a blind eye to it. The basics of journalism is supposed to be, hey, what's happened here? What are the facts here? Instead, he claims to have watched the entire war campaign video, and then started concern trolling himself with the quote-unquote Gina of the horror of war campaign. I mean, that's what everyone in war campaign calls her, the literal horror of war campaign. And he's concern trolling about somebody who's playing a bit. Not a good look. So this is why I believe Bleeding Fool, whatever. I keep slipping them up, but it doesn't matter because they're the same thing at this point. There's no difference between them anymore. They rely on out of context statements, out of context everything to try and make a point. Now you might be asking, why is Preston Poulter relevant to all this in the first place? And that's because Preston Poulter is a habitual liar. And he's been engaging in attacks against Comicsgate for months. And again, he's also been wielding the influence and power of Bleeding Fool for his biased agenda. Recently on November 10th, someone named Michael Gutierrez wrote an article about it, finally calling him out because the editors refused to do so. Again, Chris Braley, who clearly has an agenda at this point, has been allowing factually inaccurate articles from Preston Poulter to get approved and published on the site without any sort of quality control. So, and this is why so many people had a problem with him. Now, I could do a separate article about Preston Poulter in and of itself. For example, Preston Poulter is someone who's been butthurt because he didn't appear on Ethan Van Sciver's show. Look, Ethan Van Sciver, I would love to come on your show and discuss Guinevere and the Divinity Factory. Ethan, I sure would love to promote my project on your channel. Merry Christmas, man. Thanks for wanting me to have me on your show. Color to discuss. May I come on Saturday to discuss Guinevere and the Divinity Factory? Help me, Ethan Sciver. You're my only. I need your help to make Guinevere and the Divinity Factory a success. And this is December. I'd love to come on your show and talk about Guinevere and the Divinity Factory. Great live stream. Thanks for offering to have me on. At what time? So when is it good today? UPS says a copy of Guinevere and the Divinity Factory delivered. Do you like the comic I sent you? So what did you think about the comic I sent you? This is in March. March. Did you like the comic I sent you? So of course, that's who Preston Poulter is. He's been working either directly with Chris Braley, or Chris Braley is aware of all of this and has been turning a blind eye to it for a very long time. And so, when he doesn't get his way, and he has a temper tantrum starting in April, what happens? So, blah, blah, blah. When you said you wanted to have me on a platform, that was all BS. He turns into a scorned lover here. Ask you anything, okay, what did you think about Guinevere and the Divinity? Well, you did hold yourself out as a man who wants to share his battle with up-and-coming creators. Blah, blah, blah. This is him again. I'm glad Uncle E clarified his unwillingness to help people who actually make comics. For a while there, you were shrugging your shoulders and saying, well, maybe. Just didn't make the cut for quality. So after all of this harassment, and all of this fucking garbage, and scorned lover, Ethan Van Sciver blocked someone who blocked him. This is somebody who shall remain nameless, but I can recognize this avatar. I know who this is. He gets blocked, and then, like a scorned lover, what a snowflake. Like, it's not a snowflake when you're being a fucking pest and a nuisance, and you get blocked. So anyway, that's Preston Poulter. He's been a jack for a very long time. Chris Braley has been well aware of it as a managing editor at Bleeding Fool for a long time, and just goes and harasses Micah Curtis. This is all why just Bleeding Fool, Bleeding Stool, whatever you want to call it, they just have no credibility. This was the last straw, as far as I'm concerned. I would highly implore everyone who to just unfollow Bleeding Fool and just stop writing for them, because they're not a news organization. They're no different from Bleeding Cool. They're no different from Comic Book Review. They're no different from Newsarama or any of those other sites they're only concerned with wielding their influence to try and have power over people. They're just concerned about using their influence to control and become tastemakers. Anyway, I don't often do drama videos, dun dun dun, but this was the last straw with this guy who's a managing editor at Bleeding Stool. I just had to speak out on that because this is out of control. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.